Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from Series 2000, and it's book number 14, Jekyll and Heidi. This book was a really dark book. For Series 2000, I'm not surprised though. Very rarely in a Goosebumps book does it hit the ground running with your sad, depressing emotions taking hold of you, and you have to read the whole book with that negative light. But it works. It's supposed to be a depressing story. It's very different from your average Goosebumps book, and for that, I consider this a very standout book, and it's going to get a very high rating. But it does have a little bit of a drawback for me, and I'll get to that at the end of the video. Now, I know you guys know that I do reviews on Series 2000 books, and this one has been requested to me a couple of times now. I've been dying to read it, and I must say, like I said, for a book that I thought was going to be a ripoff of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's not really a ripoff. It's kind of its own different thing. And it's very one-dimensional, so when I do this plot overview, it's going to be very brief, very skimming the surface, since it's so one-dimensional, because if I go too deep, I'm going to spoil a lot of stuff that are integral to the story. The story is very short compared to most Goosebumps books. It's a less than 120 pages. There's not really that much depth to it. It's a very flat reading book, so it's easy to follow. It's easy to get invested into. There's not much depth to it. So, with that being said, let's get into the plot. So, Heidi tragically has lost her parents. And it immediately jumps into this, mind you. It does not shy away from making you sad off the bat. But yeah, Heidi has lost her parents, and she has to take a bus up to Vermont, where her uncle's supposed to pick her up, because she has to go live with him now. Whether Child Protective Services are sending her up there, I don't know. It's implied that her uncle now has custody over her, and she gets to live with him and her cousin Mariana. And mind you, she hasn't seen her uncle or her cousin since she was 5 years old, but she does remember her uncle as this kooky scientist type guy that she jokingly called like Dr. Frankenstein, and she remembers having a laugh with him and having some really positive memories. So she's, even though she's sad, she has to do this and make the best of it. And she finally arrives at this bus stop, and her uncle hasn't shown up. Nobody's there. It's kind of deserted. It's freezing cold in Vermont. This isolated village type of town. It's kind of like Beware the Snowman in the atmosphere, as you'll read. That's the closest thing I can put it to. I know Monster Blood in his review talked about this as well. It's very close to Beware the Snowman. And Beware the Snowman is a very good book. So if you like Beware the Snowman, you'll like this. But anyway, she sees no one, and then she hears a voice, and it's discovered that this boy named Aaron, sees her, and she starts talking with him. She gives a little backstory on who she is, and Aaron's kind of weary, saying, "Hey, look, you got to be careful of your uncle. People think that he's this monster, this beast that destroys this town every night." She's like, "I don't believe you. You're just saying that because his last name is Jekyll. Like, hey, you're just stereotyping my family's name." She dismisses him, bids farewell to him, and walks to her uncle's mansion. And there she's greeted by her cousin Mariana, who she remembers distinctly for her eye color and her hairstyle. And Mariana's even telling her, "It's not safe for you, need to go away." But the housemaid says, "You know what, don't listen to her. Come inside, we'll get you to your room. You look freezing. We'll get you some warm food and get you settled in." She sees her room. She surprisingly likes her room, given how gothic feeling this castle is. It's a very gothic feeling story to begin with, but it does a really good job painting the castle when she's in there, and she's navigating these long halls with these romantic era 1800s feeling decorations and these old ornate oak doors. She has these old musty smelling furniture in her room, that kind of situation. Mariana says, "Why don't you go stay in your room and wait till my dad comes out, because if you go bother him now, he's going to be really mad." But she doesn't listen to her instructions. She goes to see what her uncle's doing in his lab, and she notices all these beakers and these chemicals everywhere, And her uncle says, "Heidi, is that you?" And he comes and greets her. They have a little exchanging of words, and she notices that her uncle's like very obsessed with his work. Something seems off about him, and in the back of her mind, she can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, he's this monster. But she doesn't really know yet. So it comes down to dinner, and she learns that Mariana and her uncle, Uncle Jekyll, that's his last name, have this kind of tumultuous relationship. They're not really that close. They're very quiet with each other. They don't really talk. And when Mariana does talk to him, he tends to like ignore her. It's kind of situation. But Heidi, is like, you know what, I'm going to, I can't forget I lost my parents, but I'm going to try to make it the best I can here. And as the story progresses, all of this takes place on like winter break, so there's no school or anything. So Heidi is getting to know the ins and outs of the giant mansion. It's very easy to get lost. And as you'll come across in the story will keep going on. And then something happens one night. This beast got out and wreaked havoc in the town, and these news reporters came to do her coverage. Heidi notices Aaron talking to the news reporters, and she goes to publicly defend her uncle. The people are questioning her, kind of like accusing her of stuff. She doesn't know what they're talking about, but this kind of more solidifies that, hey, wait, this beast is actually real, because now she finally is seeing the damages done by the beast. So a couple of things, happen here and there, nothing really too important. But then she discovers a secret compartment in her room with this hidden diary, presumably from the original Dr. Jekyll, from the, old story from like hundreds of years ago, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. At least that's what she thought at the time. And she discovers maybe there might be more truth to this. So she's going to, once and for all, try to figure out if her uncle is indeed this beast that everyone accuses him of being. And she decides to excuse herself at dinner and sneak into his lab, and she witnesses this crazy event, and her uncle ends up finding her, locks her in the room, says, "This is for your own good, I gotta go." And he leaves the castle on foot down the hill, and she escapes. It's a pretty scary scene of her trying to escape the castle mansion place, and she ends up getting cornered by the beast. Then it's revealed that not everything is as it seems. I'm not going to go any further with this that much, but not everything is as it seems. And then it ends up being this angry mob has had enough with all this destruction, and they're going to go up to the mansion and they're going to burn it down. Ultimately, Heidi knows she has to rescue her cousin and her uncle, and they have to get out of here because they don't have a life here anymore, because they're just going to burn everything they own. So ultimately, they try escaping, and something happens where I don't want to give it away, but I'm just going to say some people get away and some people get left behind. And the person who gets left behind has a very ambiguous ending. And I'll leave it at that. Yeah, because I don't want to go into any further, because then I'll spoil a lot. So yeah, basically in a nutshell, that's Jekyll and Heidi. Strengths with this book. There's a lot of strengths with this book. The imagery is there. The unique feeling of the gothic tones. Just darkness throughout this book. Very different, but also very cool at the same time. I like the differences from your average read. It wasn't a direct ripoff of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I really enjoyed. I thought this was going to be a ripoff. I thought this was like, I might like this, I might not. But I thought this was really good. I think Heidi was a very well-written character. A lot of sympathy with her character. I actually almost shed a tear at one point. Very impactful stuff. Probably one of the more heavy-hitting, heartfelt stories that Goosebumps has to offer. Not to mention, R.L. Stine has mentioned that this and Brain Juice are some of his most proud works he did from Series 2000. So yeah, if you're one of those people that like to read R.L. Stine, R.L. Stine said it recommendation kind of things, I would recommend this one. Very good. But it does have a drawback. it does have a drawback. And like I said, I try not to spoil the end, but the drawback to me is the end, and it's because of the ambiguity of the ending itself. You don't know what happens to the people who manage to leave, and you don't understand why this thing actually happened, or why it should make sense to the person who got left behind. Because to me, I felt like R.L. put that there to kind of give like a twist horror ending, just to put a twist there. But I just felt like it just didn't make sense, nor was it warranted. And also, there's a plot hole. And plus, I just don't like the ambiguity behind the negative feeling I had with reading that ending. Because the sympathy for this character has been there throughout the whole book, and now you have to feel a certain way, like in a negative light. I just don't like it. Like I said, I don't want to get into it because then you'll probably guess the story and the ending if I go into detail about it. But yeah, the ending itself just really bugged me. But yeah, let's get into the rating. This one's going to get a 4.5 or higher. This is an excellent book. So from 0 to 5 stars, like I said, with the ending and all the problems I kind of mentioned, kind of all enveloped, I deducted 0.3 off. And I think a 4.7 out of 5 is a very fair score for this. It's not a perfect book, but it is a very well-written, well above average, excellent book. And it definitely deserves that A rating. So yeah, 4.7 out of 5 for Jekyll and Heidi. So let me know in the comment section, guys. Did you love or hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.